Ladies and gentlemen, good day to everyone. Welcome to the Unisys 2020 Virtual Agile Business Suite User Conference. I'm Károly Cseusz. I will be your host for this event. Today we have two sessions to present, both will be about 45 minutes. Then we allow around 15 minutes for your questions after each session. During the presentations, you all will be muted. So please hold your questions in the Q&A part. We will have a short break before the second session. And I think that's it for now. Maybe one more thing. Once you view the presentations, please make sure you go on full screen mode to have the best appearance. With this, let me hand over to Chuck, who leads our ClearPath Forward product management team, which defines the overall product strategy, roadmap, and requirements prioritization for all ClearPath products, including AB Suite. Chuck, the stage is yours.
And let me add my welcome and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our valuable, important AB Suite users and clients from around the world. We're doing this virtual event this year rather than an in-place event, of course, due to the world pandemic that we're experiencing, and we're taking advantage of that by broadening the invitation list to include a worldwide audience. So welcome to everyone from around the world. AB Suite continues to be a really key program for our ClearPath product line. We have many, both large and small users that use AB Suite to drive the IT applications in their business. Going into 2021 into 2021, we're broadening the scope of that product to introduce it for our OS 2200 products. We have many of our own solutions that we deploy based on AB Suite, primarily in the financial marketplace. You'll hear over the next 3 days a lot about our direction, newer product capabilities. Most importantly, the transition we're doing to enable AB Suite and, in fact, our entire product line to run in a public cloud and run effectively in a public cloud, including our introduction of the MCP product itself running in a public cloud. Maybe some of you have seen those product announcements. AB Suite is really a leader in that area of public cloud, and in fact, our first large client that's moving their MCP workload to a public cloud is predominantly an AB Suite application user. They're taking that entire environment to the public cloud. Lastly, just wanted to make sure everyone is aware that we continue to expand our capacity to support you and your workloads, your AB Suite workloads, whether it be in staff augmentation or full application managed services. If you need some additional resource to continue to carry forward with your AB Suite application, certainly get in touch with Unisys. I hope you find these next sessions, the next 3 days, to be very valuable for you in charting your future course for your use of AB Suite. And again, thank you for your attendance. And with that, I'll turn it over to Thanga to present the first session of the day. Thank you. Thanga?
Thank you very much, Chuck. Hi, good morning, good afternoon to all. So hope you'll have an exciting session and get to know a lot more about AB Suite in this and the subsequent sessions. As Chuck mentioned, the AB Suite family is growing. In addition to MCP and Windows customers, we also now have the OS 2200 customers because we are building the AB Suite for the OS 2200 platform as well. So I welcome them to this AB Suite family. And I would also like to make a special welcome to the BTG, our partner BTG. BTG has been training a number of AB Suite students, or rather training students on AB Suite, and they've been helping us on tech reviews in the past, and they also helped clients find AB Suite skilled resources as well. So special thanks to them, and we have a number of participants from BTG as well. So I just wanted to make a note of that and thank them. With that, I'll get started with my presentation. It's going to be a pretty packed next 45-minute session. And joining me would be Howard and Russell from the engineering team, and I am Tanga from the product management team. We have put in a lot of effort, with demos and a lot of thinking what we want to present, and we hope you really enjoy this session and get to learn a lot as well from this session. With that, I'll get started. So the way we are structured for today's session is that, as a product manager, my focus has always been to see, as the AB Suite product evolves, how do we stay relevant? What are the various themes, that are very relevant for the AB Suite, and what are the market trends happening there? So, I'm going to talk more aligned with, from a market-based perspective, because that's what product management do. We have to be very aligned to the product and to our customers. And as part of that, I'll be telling what new features we are building. And I'll also cover, the last section a little bit about more about the roadmap in terms of what we're thinking about the future. Just to set the context, ever since the COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic by WHO, it's become the new normal, and technology has become even more important than ever. Because everything is becoming contactless, be it banking or be it any kind of service that we are looking at, everybody wants to have it done through their mobile in a very digital way and in a very contactless way. So digital, disruption is happening in a very significant way. I would probably say it's more accelerated, post this post this COVID situation. And we are seeing that, more than 44% of the companies, are preparing for the digital disruption. And we have also seen that while the digital disruption is happening, there is a change in the organizations as well. Many of the workforce is changing because it's expected that 50% of the workforce will be millennials by 2020 because the Gen Z is here. And even more importantly, the jobs are also going to change significantly in the next 12 years, and most of these jobs, after 12 years have not yet been invented. What does this all mean for us? From our perspective, the way we look into it is, hey, how can we make you more productive so that you have extra time to, to learn new skills so that, for the new jobs that could potentially come out? And how do you, transition, and how do you enable your new, team members who have joined you to learn those new skills so that, the tools are easy to use? That's one of our primary theme. How can we enable that ease of use so that the newer workforce are able to pick it up? And again, we'll also talk about the technologies like cloud, which are all some of the major technologies which are driving the digital disruption, and how Unisys and AB Suite team can help you out there. So with that, the themes, as I said, we're going to talk about cloud because we are seeing a number of our clients are having cloud, as an initiative, and they want to put in a strategy and implement them over the years to come. And we have seen at the heart of any digital transformation, it's very important when there is a business requirement, how do you quickly turn around and deliver the software quickly and reliably? I mean, how quickly you can turn around is a key aspect. And to do that, DevOps is a key strategy in that, because that enables the, the delivery of software quickly. And we have to do that in a very safe and secure way, because the more the digitization happens, the more is going to be the cyber attacks. So any software that we are developing, we always keep security on the top of our mind. And we've also seen that microservices and based applications are becoming the norms. How do you enable microservices-based integration and development? Even before I start the theme, we have already having many AB Suite clients. There are some clients who are in EAE and they're transitioning to AB Suite. Across the world, we see clients love AB Suite. Why? I just thought I'll reinforce that message here. Number one, AB Suite is one of those few model-driven development tool sets that actually generates code for multiple platforms. Very few products in the the market can claim that kind of statement, but we do. we generate 100% of the solutions from the model, be it for ClearPath MCP or the Windows platform or the next platform that we are going to release it for, which is the OS 2200 platform. And one of the things about the client's law is the high-level language, because it brings in the the higher productivity, because it is a lesser code to write, test, and maintain. And most importantly, it is easy to use because it's Visual Studio based, and it provides this higher level scripting language. And as we talk about, it embraces all the the latest themes which make our clients' lives easier as they adopt them, be it cloud or be it DevOps or be it microservices. So from an EAE client standpoint, AB Suite, brings in all the benefits of EAE plus many more, as you will see in the subsequent slides. So I'm going to talk first about the the cloud theme. So I want to kind of give a a journey. Many of when I talk to many of our clients, they keep saying, hey Thanga, we want to look at to take a cloud journey, but how do we start with that? From our experience, we have seen that the best way to start your cloud journey is to do first the development in the cloud, because you want to test the waters, with the AB Suite running, on the, at least for your development purposes on the cloud, and that gives you a great start in your cloud journey. And it offers a number of benefits as well, because it's a cloud environment. You get the the compute, storage, networking all from the cloud. It's easy to take them on demand very easily. So it eliminates a lot of the burden of setting up the new environment. But think about it, when you're talking about a dev environment, it could be the dev, it could be the system test, it could be integration test, it could be UAT. So development consists of many different environments. So that's where starting with the on the development in the cloud it makes it much more easier. And you could also take advantage of pre-configured images, which kind of provide a template, that guides the creation of VM, that kind of configuration that you want, and then you kind of replicate that environment depending on the teams that are using, and provides a lot of advantages there. And the other benefit is, you can access it from anywhere, because it's all deployed onto the cloud-based environment. And we have seen that once your project is completed, you can always release your VMs which are no longer needed. So that way you can ramp up your compute and your VMs as needed, and you can ramp down once your projects are getting completed. The next use case which we suggest as part of the use cases, as part of this journey, is to start thinking about Azure DevOps services. Earlier most of you are already familiar about the Team Foundation server. From a Microsoft strategy perspective itself, they recommend Azure DevOps services over TFS, which is now called as Azure DevOps Server. And we also recommend that you start thinking about Azure DevOps services. And we have seen clients who start sometimes the journey not sometimes with AB Suite development in the cloud, but rather they start with Azure DevOps services, because this is typically used for the application lifecycle management, source control, and provides a great way to start again your cloud journey. And here I kind of shown you two use cases. In the first use case, we are seeing a situation wherein the AB Suite developer is in the on-premise environment, and Azure DevOps services is being used. So that way you get a combination. The developer is on premises, but you still use the Azure DevOps services on the public cloud. But the more common scenario that we see is where both AB Suite developer and Azure DevOps services are running in the Azure public cloud. Both of them running there is there again, like the previous slide I talked about, there are much more benefits in doing that, and that's what we would also recommend to go with. Now that I've started with my developer in the cloud, I've started doing Azure DevOps services in the cloud. The next logical step would be to think about runtime in the Azure cloud. The good news is that we have now successfully announced the support for AB Suite MCP runtime in the Azure cloud. So it's formally supported now. So clients have the choice to use the MCP software series and use the AB Suite for MCP runtime in the Azure cloud. So that way all your AB Suite components are running in the cloud. So I'm going to talk about a few client stories just to reinforce how some of the clients are using it. Even before I do that, just as a quick recap of the milestones, I talked about many things, and I said, hey, we're running, developer, running Azure DevOps, just to give a timeline of how we did the various qualifications, because For most of us, we do know that the 7.0 release happened in May last year, and the team has been really busy, the engineering team has been busy developing the 8.0 release. But one of the things we have been very conscious about is to keep the relevant qualifications based on our, the interest and feedback from our clients. So even though the 7.0 release has been happened, we have been doing a number of new qualifications, and it shows in this slide here. In September last year, we started supporting Azure DevOps services, and we also started supporting the AB Suite for Windows runtime on the Azure public cloud last year. And this September, which is just like a month back, we gave the official support for AB Suite MCP runtime as well on the Azure cloud. And another good news for the Windows clients is that now we are supporting the Windows runtime on both Azure as well as the AWS public cloud. So Windows is supported on both the two major public cloud vendors, which is Azure and AWS. And from a future direction standpoint, we still continue to have the conversation. The future directions are always subject to change, but we're trying to see whether our OS 2200 clients are interested on the cloud, on the cloud. And one of the areas we're looking at is to support the runtime, AB Suite for OS 2200 runtime on VMware for Azure. And there are a few other cloud native features for AB Suite Windows also that we are trying to evaluate from a future direction standpoint, which I'll talk about it in the last section. And just a quick, highlight of the client story is that, here was a client, after the pandemic, they were seeing a number of changes, post, the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a lot of application changes that they had to do, and there was a lot of more volume they had to deal with. The other challenge they also were facing is, they were having challenges due to a retiring workforce. So they reached out to Unisys and said, hey, Unisys, can you help us out here? We would like to go to the cloud, and these are some of the challenges we are having. Can you help us out? So AB Suite, not just from a technology, but also from a services, we, from an end-to-end perspective, approach the client and try to put together a solution for them, in which they try to, they're trying to use AB Suite with a ClearPath MCP Gold and MCP Dev Studio, and they're trying to host it on an Azure cloud. And as I said, there are many pieces of it because Unisys is doing the services as well. They're trying to help them qualify on the latest version of AB Suite, which is 7.0 release, help them in the AB Suite application development and testing, MCP operations administration, and things like that. So, that is, we thought, we are very excited with this story, and we are hoping more clients will go through this path, and we'll see many more clients transition in a similar fashion. Another interesting story to talk about would be is, the Arab Bank Corporation. Here is another, we talk about, I talked about, hey, the new normal. Here is a client who, typically reflects, that kind of the new normal, very modern, organization, because they have this ambition to launch a new digital mobile-only bank and attract a new generation of customers. And they wanted to maintain the market leadership in Middle East and grow in international markets. So again, Unisys helped them, we're using AB Suite. Again, in this case, they're actually running AB Suite on AWS. But in addition to AB Suite, they're using a number of other solutions also. For instance, Stealth to protect their transactions, Cloud Forte for consulting and integration services as well. So another, very interesting client story out there. So a net summary, we believe there's a lot for AB Suite clients from a cloud standpoint. Many organizations, CIO, have a cloud-first strategy. It's kind of like a mandate for them. So this, whatever use cases I talked about, it helps them to traverse, into the cloud journey and helps them, to meet their objectives. But most importantly, it helps you to smooth your cloud transition because, you want to transition your on-premises to investments into the cloud with ease, and Heavy Suite can help you to do that with no required code changes. And it will greatly reduce the risk. And of course, it provides increased agility and scalability as well. That's about the cloud theme. I'm going to move to the next section. The next section I talked about, when we started about the strategic themes, I said at the heart of any digital transformation is, how fast you can deliver your releases. So from that standpoint, DevOps plays a very key role. In the past, people would talk about stability versus speed. I think that statement is no more accepted, and it has been proven that there are companies who are able to achieve stability along with the speed at which they want to go. It's all about using the right tool sets. It's all about using the right processes and having the right culture. And from AB Suite standpoint, we are providing, in integration with Azure DevOps services to provide you with the right tool sets and also the right, the environment, so that you could have a much more agile delivery of your release cycles. So what are the key concepts we are talking about here? The number one is source control. So in this case, AB Suite uses, the Azure, as part of the Azure Team Foundation version control, which is part of the Azure repos for the source control of the AB Suite models. And once configured, it is remarkably easy to add the AB Suite project. So we believe this is going to be a very useful one. And subsequently, after I walk through a couple of slides, Russell is going to show a more detailed, not a detailed, high-level demo of how some of these things are going to be done. The second key aspect is, the build. Very importantly, as part of the continuous integration, build automation is an important one. In any team, there are many team members who are submitting work daily or more frequently, and they're doing a number of changes. The good thing is that with the AB Suite Builder, along with the Azure pipelines, you can generate and deploy solutions in a single step. So there's a lot of build automation that you could do. And most of you know that, for at least for other products, it's that the code that they try to do the build automation. But from an AB Suite, because it's a model development, we also do the code generation. So AB Suite has always been a step ahead from a DevOps standpoint and an automation standpoint. And the third key aspect is about the test automation. So source control, build automation, and test automation. And ATT is another great tool that enables the continuous testing along with within the Azure DevOps pipeline, and it can confirm whether your application is meeting your requirements and working as expected, and ensuring that that it provides the relevant quality before you move it to your production environment. So we talked about continuous integration, right? So in the last 3 slides, and the core concepts as part of the continuous integration. But taking the continuous integration to the next step is continuous delivery, in which you take it across the release chain, which includes the QA, operations, and all the way up to production. But most cases, there is a lot of formal approvals that is needed before you take it to the production. And from our experience, which is something that we want to continuously monitor ourselves, and we encourage clients also to continuously monitor these 3 key metrics. Because that is what at the end of the day is going to make you very agile. One is the deployment frequency. How many times do you deploy to the environment of your choice? Whatever environment you're looking at, how frequently are you deploying it to that? What is the lead time for changes? What does that mean is that once you have done your commitment of your code, or rather a code check-in, and from the time of the code check-in, how long does it take to do all the build, test, automation, everything, and it finally to move to the environment, be it the production environment, or be it the UAT, or be it your whatever system test environment, to get it deployed to that. What is the lead time of change for that? And finally is the time to restore. There is, in any software, in any software engineering practice, there is always going to be some failures. We have to anticipate that. So what is the time to restore? So those are some of the 3 key metrics that we look at ourselves. And we as over the future releases also, we will try to see how we can improve upon these 3 key metrics. With that, I'm going to pass over the control to Russell, who is going to show you a demo of how AB Suite provides these DevOps capabilities. I'm going to pass the control to Russell now. Just give me a moment.
Thank you, Sengar. Yes, my name is Russell Petterick, and my current role is a product architect for AB Suite. Now, I've recently been working with a team who have been developing an AB Suite application for the purposes of testing and qualifying AB Suite with Azure DevOps. So we've been using the new platform OS 2200, but of course Azure DevOps works equally well with AB Suite on MCP and Windows. Now, I prepared a short recording of an Azure DevOps demo, and I'd like to play that for you now.
I'd like to do a quick demonstration of AB Suite and Azure DevOps in action. We're starting here with Visual Studio Open to the Source Control Explorer, and we're looking at the Azure DevOps repository. In this case, we're integrated with the cloud-based Azure DevOps services, and we can see the URL there. And within our repository, we have a number of folders and projects under Source Control. The ones I'm interested in today are this one, which is our AB Suite project, and this folder here, which is our corresponding ATT project. Now, in this demonstration, I've already made a change to this particular method, and I've also made a corresponding change to the ATT test cases. This is our ATT test case, and I've made corresponding changes to the individual test steps. Now we're going to check in those changes, and I'll select pending changes, and here we can see a list of all of the changes that I've made. This is the changed version file from my AB Suite project and the changed source files in my ATT project. I'm now going to check them in and press the check in button. Okay, so now the action of checking in has actually triggered an Azure pipeline to run that pipeline on a build agent machine. It has a defined set of steps. We go back to Home on the Team Explorer and then select Builds. Up the top here, we can see a list of the last half dozen or so builds that I've done. And it's the top one here that's of interest. This particular build triggered for change set 44. And that little blue icon there indicates that it is running at the moment. So that's the build that has been triggered just as a result of me checking in. While that Azure pipeline is running, let's go and have a look at the definition of that pipeline within Azure DevOps. So let's say View Builds in the browser. So here we have a list of pipelines that have been defined, and it's this one here that I'm interested in. And this little spinning icon actually tells us that that pipeline is running. And this here shows a list of all the tasks that are defined to be performed as part of that pipeline. So we start by getting the sources. It gets the latest changes out of our source control repository. And then it assigns a series of jobs to be run on a build agent. The interesting steps here are a Visual Studio build. This is the build and deploy of the AB Suite system. In this particular case, we're building to the new platform for this release, OS 2200. And the last step here is to run my ATT project. Okay, so it's now just a few minutes later, and we can see here in Team Explorer that our build now has a green tick, and it says here completed 8 seconds ago, including the build of the model, the deploy to my OS 2200 host, and the execution of the full ATT test suite. I've now switched across to my email system, and I can see here that a new automated email has just arrived in my inbox. Azure DevOps build succeeded. So we get that confirmation. I can select that email, and I can go and view the detailed results. Overall, we can see that this build pipeline ran for 4 minutes. So all looks good. So at this stage, I'm confident my change has been checked in, integrated with the source control. It's been fully built and deployed to our test environment, and it's had the full set of defined test cases run against it. So I'm completely confident that my change has been tested and that the functionality is working correctly and there are no regressions. Now that, of course, has been the happy path where everything has succeeded. The build was successful and the ATT test was successful. But this is a team environment, and the work of multiple engineers is being integrated into the Azure DevOps repository, and the build is building the fully integrated source code. I've just done a new check-in, and a few minutes later, the following email has popped into my inbox. Azure DevOps build failed. So from here, I can drill into the results. When I drilled into the results, I discovered that an ATT test case failed. And now I'm looking at the detail of the ATT test cases, and I've found a transaction that failed. And we can see down here that the return code of this transaction had an expected value of 100, but the actual value was 911. So now I need to take corrective action. Either the ATG test case needs to be updated to test for the correct application behaviour, or else there was a bug in the application and I need to fix the bug to restore the correct behaviour, or I can revert and roll back the entire change set and go back to the drawing board and revisit that change. So at the end of the day, I've been notified that there is an integration problem very quickly within just a few minutes. I've diagnosed it within a few minutes, and now I can quickly resolve it again within a few minutes. And once again, get to the state of having a fully successful integrated DevOps build. So that has been a quick demonstration of AB Suite working with Azure DevOps services. And it has shown the DevOps principles of version control, continuous integration, continuous testing, and the use of automation to achieve all of that.
Okay, Senga, I'll just pass control back to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Russell, for the demo. I think it reinforced a lot of the DevOps concepts. Thanks for that. Okay, let me share again. All right, so we are going to move to the next theme. So as I said, this is the third theme we want to talk about, which is the security theme. And in Unisys, security is held very seriously, because security is at the heart of all of our products and services. So security is very important for us. But just to set the context, security is becoming even more important than ever, because hackers attack every 39 seconds, and the average total cost of breach is 3.9 million, and the average life cycle of a breach is 279 days. What does that mean? On an average, based on some surveys, it takes about 206 days to first identify the breach, and then an additional 73 days to contain the breach. So security should be taken very seriously, right? So from AB Suite standpoint, over the last release that we did, 7.0, we put in a number of security features, and for the upcoming release 8.0, again, we are putting in a lot more features as well. And for instance, field level encryption, we, for the security of the, the DMS2 database on the MCP side, we have provided some encryption features. Similarly, on the AB Suite for Windows, for the SQL Server, we are enabling, the transparent data encryption. And in the next few slides, Howard will talk about what's already available as part of 7.0 and what is coming up in 8.0 release. But this is just a summary slide out here. So encryption is very important for data in rest, particularly on the databases. And there is always a case where the data is being transferred, so that the data should be secured. In the case of, for instance, like secure rattle is very important. When the communication is happening between the client tools and the runtime. So we are supporting TLS 1.2 and as part of it, and we also have plans to support as part of the 8.0 a secured FTP transfer, which again Howard will be talking about in more detail. And then in the 7.0 release, we put in a number of security features as part of the system administration as well. So the next 6 minutes, we are going to see some more details about that. And with that, Howard, would you like to give a brief introduction about yourself and talk about them in more detail?
Sure, thanks, Senga. Hi, everyone. I'm Howard Bell, and I'm the EAE and AB Suite MCP Runtime Architect. In the next 6 slides, I would like to expand on the AB Suite MCP security topics already introduced by Senga, and I'll be providing further details on securing data in motion, securing data at rest, and ongoing security administration aspects. Next, please. Providing a secure remote access connection for Component Enabler had been an outstanding feature for quite a while, and effective with AB Suite 7.0, this was addressed.
It's a relative straightforward configuration for both ends of the connection to create and install the certificates and configure the secure transport. The slide shows two configuration fragments, one for each side of the connection: the ClearPath host CCF file and the component enabler side. Here we are showing the ASP.NET connection. However, all client presentation types are supported. Details on the certificate creation, processing, and installing on the host via Security Center, as well as importing into the Windows Trusted Store, are detailed in the Agile Business Suite Installation and Configuration Guide. Next, please. In AB Suite 8.0, encryption is now provided for files transferred between the developer client to the host during deployment. This is provided by enabling FTPS between the client and the host. Again, it's a relative straightforward configuration for both ends of the connection to create and install the certificates and configure the secure transport. The slide shows two configuration fragments, one for each side of the connection: the ClearPath host FTP configuration file changes and TCP IP configuration, as well as the developer deployment use secure FTP configuration property. Again, details on the certificate creation, processing, and installing on the host via Security Center, as well as importing into the Windows Trusted Store, are detailed in the Agile Business Suite Installation and Configuration Guide. So let's now examine the at-rest data when it is resident in the DMS2 database. Next, please. Effective with AB Suite MCP 8.0, there are three ways to protect your data resident in the DMS2 database, and these involve data encryption and data masking. DMS2 field level encryption requires a minimum of MCP 18, while DMS2 structure level encryption requires MCP 19. Data masking was supported in the AB Suite 5.0 release, and DMS2 FLE was supported in the AB Suite 7.0 release. The class property secure technique dictates whether the data is not encrypted, none. The whole class will be encrypted, structure encryption, which is SLE. One or more class attributes may be encrypted, data encryption, which is FLE, or one or more class attributes may be masked, data masking. Next slide, please. The segment DASDL configuration property data encryption type is used to specify the required encryption type. Besides the default of none, there is AES GCM and AES HMAC algorithms. And as the slide shows, only AES GCM is supported for SLE. Note that data masking has its own configuration property of the skate level that dictates the data masking technique. If the class secure technique property is set to data encryption or structure encryption, then the algorithm selected here will be used. Next, please. The secure technique property on the class level defines whether this class has encryption or data masking enabled. The encryption type property at the segment level defines which, if any, encryption algorithm will be used. Now, at the attribute level, you use the isSecure property to enable the appropriate secure technique for this attribute. Next, please. The sensitive data option provides security for persistent data when it is deleted. When you use the sensitive data option, the sensitive data file attribute is set on the database files. So when a record is deleted from a database file, the disk area previously occupied by the record is scrubbed before being returned to the system for reallocation. Log access DM verbs, when used in conjunction with the class property log access, allows you to specify which DM verbs are logged in the system sumlog. For example, if you specify store and delete in the log access DM verbs list, then any execution of the store or delete verbs for this class will be logged in the system sumlog. This provides granular logging of DM verbs for nominated database structure, as any execution of the selected DM verbs against the nominated structures will be captured to the system sumlog and available for auditing purposes. For audit trail security, by using the existing copy audit to tape user-defined property, you can specify quick copy and then enable audit encrypt and compression as needed. You can specify TDES, AES-256 or AES-GCM encryption algorithms, with TDES being the default. Additionally, database dumps may also be encrypted by selecting an encryption option for the dump encrypt type segment DASDL configuration property. And this supports the same encryption algorithms as audit encrypt. And that completes my slides. Thank you, Zenga.
Thank you very much, Howard. That was very informative. A lot of cool security features. Okay, so we covered the cloud theme, we covered the DevOps theme, we covered the security theme. So with that, we come to the last theme, which is the microservices. So, microservices, is a kind of an architecture, and the way you integrate and the way you consume other applications and the way you publish your interfaces so that other applications could consume the application that you are building. And there are from AB Suite team standpoint, we recommend that you go with one of the two options, which is the first one that I'm going to talk about, which is AIS, and the second one which I'm going to talk about is the ePortal. So for those who are not familiar about AIS, AIS is a application integration services. It's actually a product which has services as part of its name. It's one of those products which is very easy to use because it's Visual Studio based. It provides an intuitive API, for .NET developers so that they could call ClearPath applications, and similarly from the ClearPath applications, they could make an outbound call to .NET applications. And the other strength of this particular product is that, it's custom development. Because it's largely .NET development-based programming. The developer has really the choice in terms of what kind of interfaces he wants to use. It could be the traditional web services, it could be a REST API, it could be the message formats of XML or YAML or JSON. All because it's custom development, but that means that the .NET developer has to develop those interfaces. But it is pretty powerful in that, and because it's Visual Studio and it's based, it is easy, and also it provides intuitive APIs. So if you want to do quickly get started with some of your microservices initiative, then AIS is a nice way to get started. The team has put together a white paper to saying how do you use AIS with AB Suite, and we are expecting it to be there in the support site soon. So you can watch out for the support site space to look out for that white paper. The next option that we recommend is the ePortal. Most of you would already know about ePortal. ePortal is one of the the strategic products for Unisys, and inbound was something that ePortal provided for a long time. The inbound services. The last release of ePortal provided the outbound services as well. And in here you can see the the logical set of steps that anybody would take. If you want to invoke an external web service through ePortal. In any in today's world where everything is predominantly open API based, because it's a fairly matured standard, and people use standardized definitions of YAML or JSON. So the first step in any of these kind of the tool provides you to discovery of your service definition, because there is an external service that you want to consume. So you want to discover the service definition, and so ePortal you could do that. You could import the schema using the ePortal developer, and it automatically generates the COBOL record definitions. And once those definitions are in place, you could expose the interface from the COBOL library that could be called from AB Suite. And within AB Suite, the iSpec can make that call using the external class interface. So for anybody who is looking at a more comprehensive microservices strategy, they're having many microservices to integrate with, REST APIs to integrate with, then we recommend ePortal, because it provides a lot of automation, and as part of the future releases, we are planning more automation and more better integration between, more enhanced integration between AB Suite and ePortal as well. So definitely ePortal is the choice if you're having microservices as a key strategy, and there are many applications to be integrated with. So with that, I'm going to pass to Russell, who is going to show you a demo. We think it's a very cool demo in which AB Suite goes and calls an external web service, which basically that external web service provides some kind of sentiment analysis. So let's see what that application does. It's a cool demo, and with that, I'm going to pass over the control to Russell. Russell, I'm passing the control to you.
Hi, my name is John Papachristos. I currently work with the ePortal engineering team, but I have a long history with AB Suite, mainly in the client tools area. Today, I'll be demonstrating how you can use AB Suite to take advantage of a recently released feature in ePortal that allows you to call external RESTful web services. I'll show you a sample of what can be achieved using this capability. We'll be calling a text analytics web service running in Azure that provides sentiment analysis. What you can see here is a web application developed in ePortal from the definition of an iSpec in AB Suite. It uses popular web technologies such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, and jQuery to design and run this user interface. It's a simple form that allows you to enter a text phrase, which is sent to the text analytics web service for analysis. The result will give you an indication of the sentiment conveyed by that phrase. This can be either positive, negative, or neutral. It will also return a score that gives you an idea of how well it matched the phrase to the sentiment. So let's add some phrases. Clients love AB Suite. Let's analyze this. The result is positive. We'll try another one. This is a great conference, and we hope there are more of these. Again, a positive result with a greater score. One more. We're having great fun at this event. Again, the result is positive. Let's try a few others. It's raining outside. This time, a neutral result. It's raining outside and I'm happy. Positive result. If we say sad here, it gives us a negative result. So let me just explain what's happening here. When I submit some text, it is sent to the AB Suite application for processing. The iSpec logic uses the external class mechanism to call a COBOL library that was developed for this specific use case. The COBOL library makes a call to an ePortal library that uses web app support to call the proxy service running on the ePortal server. The service proxy calls the external web service, and then the result is returned back to my browser along the same path. So that's the end of my demo. I hope you enjoyed it.
Hey, Inga, I'll just pass control back to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Russell and JP, for the demo. All right. Okay, with that brings us to the last section of my presentation. Okay, so we saw the 4 themes. So I just want to show a kind of like a release schedule, what we are looking at. So the 7.0 release, as I said, happened in May last year. But we've been continuing to innovate and making some additional qualifications on Azure that we talked about earlier. And we also in 7.0, bought the standard mode, which most of them, have been experimenting with. It provided, ease of use for EAE clients because it provided a simplified set of capabilities and enables a much more easier transition. AB Suite was always easier, but this further eased it for the transition from EAE to AB Suite. And looking to the future release, which is the upcoming release, is 8.0. We are looking at a timeline of Q3 of 2021. And one of the primary focus for this release is we are bringing, the AB Suite for OS 2200, which is a big thing for us. And we're also looking at a number of new security features, which as we'll talk about them, the structure level encryption, secure FTP, and a couple of other NFSs as well. And as we look at beyond 8.0, the team is currently looking at what should we do for 9.0 release, which is thinking into the future. And we have already started looking at that. As a typical process, we look at the new feature suggestions that our clients submit. So we encourage you, if you're having any new things for us to consider, so we encourage you to submit it if you have not done so far. But in general, the kind of high-level themes we are looking at is, we are seeing more and more need for cloud and HA capabilities. From cloud, as I said, for OS 2200, should it be, the VMware for Azure, would it be relevant for the OS 2200 clients, for the AB Suite OS 2200 runtime? On the Windows side, we see a couple of clients asking, hey, would auto scaling be relevant? And we're trying to see if it is relevant and it would benefit our clients. SQL Server always on to provide a high availability of the SQL Server databases. That's another request that we're seeing. And ensuring that the AB Suite application is available even when it is being patched or a hot swap is being done. So, there are this HA and cloud capabilities, cloud native capabilities that we are evaluating. We're also trying to see how, the microservices, we can enhance the experience there. Currently with the ePortal, there are some things that needs to be done manually. So we are trying to see, how can we build in more automation there? how can we streamline the integration there. So for 9.0, we are looking at more streamlined and integration and automation with ePortal, and similarly with AIS also. There is some things are done manually. How could we? The strength of the AB Suite product is on the automation, so that the developer focuses on the business logic and leaves the underlying code generation and things like that to us. So we are looking at some of those things. And another interesting thing to watch out is that there's this ClearPath MCP extension kit. So there's currently a tech preview is already going on, so you can reach to the MCP team. The AB Suite team has already worked with them. So if you enroll into there, you could see some white papers. There are some demos already available, and there's a very cool demo there which shows how do you invoke a Docker container using the ClearPath MCP extension kit. And in that Docker container, it basically invokes a Python program, which again goes and calls an external service. So the Docker container, invoking the Docker container provides a whole lot of different sort of opportunities around that. So if you're interested, we encourage you to join the tech preview. And from an enhanced security standpoint, we are looking at multi-factor authentication is one. Would it be relevant? You let us know what other enhanced security features you're interested. You can reach out to us and let us know, and we will definitely consider those. Well, that brings us to the end of the session. Hope you all enjoyed it, and hope you got a lot to learn and know about the AB Suite new features. Thank you so much. Priya, do you want to open up for Q&A? Priya or Priya, can you one of you open up for Q&A? There might be some questions from the audience.
Yes.
Yes, it is open. You can use it.
Okay. Anybody has any questions?
Question on mute. I ask participants, go on mute if you are not talking or if you don't want to ask questions.
How do you sit?
Add questions at this time, right?
Feedback and questions. I don't have any questions. Oh, here we go.
We are right at the top of the hour, so I suggest we have a 5-minute break. Then we will continue with the second session for the day. Use that.
There was one question.
You're mute.
Yeah, please mute everyone, and we'll have a 5-minute break now. Thank you.
Break now and coming back?
Yes, we are taking a 5-minute break. So 5 minutes past the hour, we'll reconvene and we start with session 2.
Okay. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yep. Yep.
Zoom getting in the way.
Still hear you, Andy.
Yeah, well, I have unmuted myself on WebEx.
Ah.
So let me know if you can't hear me.
I can.
Yeah.
I can hear you, Andy.
I suggest maybe I'll try and find my countdown timer. That would have been useful in that that interlude.
I was going to say, would you mind monitoring the chat so that
yep,
we'll put questions into the chat while we're going and pick them up at the end or deal with them.
Yeah, I think you can start, Andy. 5 minutes already passed.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody. My name is Andy Wardle. I'm a senior architect. I'm an AB Suite specialist. I've worked with Link, EAE, and AB Suite over the years. And I'm here to talk to you today about things that you can do in AB Suite, but you can't do in EAE. So the idea here is that, you know, there are often a number of frustrations using EAE. It's, as a user interface goes, it's pretty old nowadays.
Andy,
yes?
You're sharing the presenter view, not the... Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine.
The other thing I was going to say to everyone is if you have any questions, if you send it to the presenters in the chat window, we'll try and answer them as Andy's going through, and or we can pick them up at the end if necessary.
Okay. Hopefully all sorted now. Technology. Nobody said I was any good at technology.
Yes, it's fine now.
So yeah, the idea is that there have been a number of frustrations using EAE. It's not the, it's certainly not the most modern in terms of its user interface. So the idea, what I wanted to do here was pick out some of those frustrations or shortcomings, if you like, and try and identify how AB Suite addresses them. And also some of the things that you can do, if you move beyond the EAE paradigm or programming paradigm. So, maybe two audiences, those customers that are still using EAE. Hopefully you'll see some things that in AB Suite that appeal to you. And for those customers that have migrated to AB Suite, but continue to develop in an EAE-like way, again, you'll see things that maybe open your eyes a little bit to what is possible with AB Suite. It's not a technical presentation, or we just use some examples as illustrations. So let me start with usability, developer usability. And okay, some simple things to start with. In AB Suite, you can change the type of an element. So you can change a standard component to a memo component, or a memo component to an event. You can change a setup data item in an iSpec to a database item. In EAE, you have to delete those items and recreate them. So it's a minor change, but it's, in terms of productivity and flexibility, it's actually quite a useful capability to have. AB Suite allows you to make bulk changes to the properties of attributes. So, you know, for example, change the length from 10 to 12, a number to signed, or whatever. How does it do that? Well, if I've got a list of the attributes, the variables, if you like, defined within an iSpec, within a class, I can highlight all the items that I want to modify. And then in the properties window, I can select the attribute that I want to change. So in this example, I could say these are all defined as strings. I might want to change them all to a number. I might want to change the length to 12. And you can see all those features in the properties window. When you select multiple items in this way, using, you know, click or control and click, typical Windows type approach, in the properties tab, in the properties window, you'll see all of the attributes that are available for you to change. In other words, all of the attributes that are common to all of those, so all the properties that are common to the selected attributes. Similarly, bulk changes to configurations. Now, configurations are akin to, they're similar to generate sets in EAE. So I've picked an example of, I've got an iSpec, a data set that I want to change the population on, the expected number, in multiple configurations. And in EAE, you'd have to go to each one individually and make sure you applied the same value. In AB Suite, I can select the configurations that I want the change to apply to, and then I go to in this case, the cust property pages, and I change the property that I want to modify. And it applies that change to all three instantly and consistently. When you use those bulk elements, by default, there's a limit of 200 that you can select at a time. In fact, to get lists, generally, there's a list, there's a default of 200. You can choose to increase that limit. If you go to Tools Options in Visual Studio, you can change that to a much larger value if you want to make those changes. In AB Suite, the developer, so the editor, has no practical limit to the length of a line of code. In EAE, there was a limit, either 80 or I think 256 characters. But fundamentally, when you needed to break a line between a statement over multiple lines, there were only predetermined places where you could do that. In AB Suite, we make the use of a continuation character to break lines wherever you wish. Fundamentally, anywhere that there's a blank space in the statement, you can introduce a continuation character and split the command over multiple lines. Developer is case insensitive. You can use mixed case for element names and in any of your LDL statements. You know, it's a matter of preference, maybe programming standards, but it's not all shouty uppercase like you do in EAE. So if you type it in lowercase, it remains in lowercase. And then third, on this form at least, this screen at least, you can choose your preferred format on a developer by developer basis for commands when you enter them in the editor. So you can choose to have everything in all your commands in uppercase or in lowercase, camel case, or you can use abbreviations, again in upper or lowercase. So a screenshot with some simple examples of the continuation character. So you can see the first determined statement has everything on a line with a long comment. The second determined statement, I'm using the continuation character to break that up into multiple lines. You would not have been able to do that, and the flexibility, the choice is yours. And then the final example is just the variations on the lookup command format. I guess I should point out there are no full stops in lookup, and there are no semicolons because they don't exist in AB Suite. Something that I find really useful is peek. So if you're in the editor and you've identified a method, a global logic in EAE terms, and you want to see what that looks like, EAE allows you to expand it, but that's all it allows you to do. AB Suite allows you to both expand it and to edit it in place. So in this situation, I've done a right click on action, which is a method, Then I've said peak definition, you get a pop-up pane, and in here you see the code, you can scroll up and down, but if you change the code in the peak, that change will be stored. So you can effectively make dynamic changes to the method, the global logic, without having to go to a separate logic window in order to achieve that. In AB Suite, all of the lists of attributes and code and what have you, they all appear in document tabs. And where this is tabular information, you can use the kind of thing you would expect to use in something like Excel to manipulate or to view that data. So here's a simple example. On the left, this is the default view of the dictionary items for this application. On the right-hand side, you'll see that I've just clicked on the primitive column, and that gives me the items in order of their type. So you can sort it ascending or descending, just as you would in Excel or something else. But we also have filters. So you can right-click on the column headings and select filter, and then you'll see these prompts, and then you can just go into one of the columns. In this example, I've put a P in the name, and that will just filter it so that it only shows me the items that start with the letter P. If I was to do PO, it would only show me the 3 address fields. And that's really flexible. It means you don't have to, you don't have to go looking for different views of the information. And then the third item I wanted to pull out here is search. In EAE, when you do a search, it's reasonably limited in what it will do, but it runs and it runs as the only thread in developer. So when you do a search, you have to sit and wait for all the results to come back before you can do anything else. In AB Suite, the search runs as an independent thread. That means we can do multiple searches in parallel. It means that while the search continues, you can carry on doing development. And it means that as soon as you get a result appearing in the search window, you can double click on it in order to review them. So here's an example of the search dialog. And here's an example also of the search window. You can see that it's searching. It's found 11,000 and it's still going. When you look at the results, it gives you a list of the objects that contain a search result. And you can expand that. And in this example, it's found a couple of logic statements. And it actually shows you the statement that meets the search criteria. That may be all you need to know. If it's not, you can double click on the line and it will take you to the code, again, while the search continues. So that's it in terms of developer usability. I wanted to move on and talk about language. Language is now LDL plus rather than LDL because we've introduced extensions and more features. The idea is I want to highlight some things that allow you to make your code clearer and more concise. So, in AB Suite, we can have complex expressions in logic statements. What do I mean by that? Let me show you an example. So here's an example where I need to do some kind of calculation and put that the result of that calculation into a variable. In EAE, I've got to do some moves. I'm then invoking a global logic, a method in AB Suite. And eventually, I'm going to do a compute command to calculate the result of 3 values and place it in a number. In AB Suite, I can do that in a single statement. Okay, so some things to pull out. Now, for arrays, you just explicitly state the index in line. You don't move it to a different variable, which is the index to the array. I can do inline calculations. And I can here, this is actually executing a method that takes 2 parameters and returns a value as a result. And I can use parentheses to define the order in which the subsidiary calculations take place. So I would hope everyone would agree that that's a much more concise and much clearer piece of code. Here's another example. Again, I'm taking that calculate interest method with parameters, But I'm using, if you like, old notation. So in the first example, I used colon equals, which is an assignment operator in AB Suite. But I can still use, if you like, move statements. So here I'm saying execute the calculate in trace method and then move the value to a number. I've got a couple more examples of variations on a theme slightly maybe, but just to show you the kind of things we can do. In EAE, if I want to send a message error, message retention, with a string that contains both, you know, text and a variable, I need to use move and attach and space in order to construct that string and then display the variable. In AB Suite, I can just do that all in line. So I've got a string, the ampersand plus is attach and space. So I'm putting error, a number, and exactly the same outcome, but again, in a single statement. And then finally, I'm doing an inline calculation of salary times increment, comparing that to a variable, or in this case, the maximum pay rise, and then I put out a message if that fails. Again, in EAE, we're looking at half a dozen lines of code and some interim variables in order to achieve the same result. So, in terms of the language, it's easily possible to refactor your code to produce fewer lines of code and fewer temporary variables when you compare it to EAE for the same outcome. And then my final point on language is we've got a new verb, a new looping verb called for each, and it has essentially two variations. You can use it as an alternative to determine and lookup commands that create a loop, you know, and so you can say for each iSpec in profile, for example. More interestingly, you can use it for iterating over arrays. So in EAE, if I want to work my way through an array, I need to have a begin loop or some kind of loop construct, and then I need to increment the index for every element that I want to inspect, and also I need to be aware of what the upper bound is for the array, how many entries, elements are in the array. With the for each statement, I don't need to do any of that. So here's a couple of very simple examples. In the first one, you can see that for each cust in cust.names is a bit like doing a determine actual cust.names, or cust names is the profile. But again, we can use the complex verbs or the complex statements to deal with that, picking up both cust.name and cust.customer as part of the output. In the second example, I'm iterating through an array called customer names array, and for each element that is returned into the name variable, I can display the value. That for each statement, it will loop for as many elements there are in the array, and it will finish when it runs out of data. Okay, so if you increase the size of the array or decrease the size of the array, your code will continue to function. You don't need to change the condition tests for the end of the array size. So that's kind of, if you like, those are tweaks to both the language and to the using the tool. But I wanted to take it a stage further, and let's look at some of the design features we can use that again give us greater flexibility or allow us to make our application more concise and consistent. And the first one is a really simple one, but you know, potentially has a wide impact. AB Suite allows you to mark a variable as a constant. So in EAE, you can have constants, but you know, there's no enforcement by the product in the use of those variables. And we've seen when we do customer upgrades that you know, we turn this feature on or we make a constant, or what's believed to be a constant, truly a constant, and then we get syntax errors because code is being, there is code that's attempting to change the value of constants. So AB Suite, we can mark any variable, any attribute as a constant, give it an initial value, and the editor will not allow you to generate, to write code that references those items. And here's an example. So I've attempted to move 25 to this thing. It's defined as a constant, and the editor gives me an error which says it's a constant. You can't do that. So, you know, now I'm not going to break anything. I'm not going to need to test or be aware of that potential. In AB Suite, we have meaningful names. The name limitations that you have in EAE do not exist within developer itself. Where elements have, you know, they have an external existence, if you like, a database item name, for example, you can still use meaningful names within the development environment, but those elements will have a property known as their alias, and you can use that to make the external name, again, taking the data item name in the database, for example, to adhere to whatever restrictions apply on the platform. So things like schema elements, ISPEC names themselves, the 5-character version is used for transaction routing, so that 5-character name has to exist in the runtime environment. Reserve words, things like that. All of those constraints which existed in EAE no longer exist in AB Suite, and therefore, you know, your code can be just more readable and meaningful. No more artificial abbreviations. And here's a very simple example. I've got a class, effectively something like an ISPEC, called account. So its name is account. All my references in my programming, my development environment are to account. But in the outside world, that will be abbreviated to ACCNT. Just a few things about the model, which, you know, some people will say, you know, not before time. We've got a new data type. You can now have genuine Booleans, values that have a simple value of true or false, rather than using 0 or 1 or whatever alternatives you may choose to use. Reports can now have more than 99 frames, because frames no longer are no longer identified by their number. They have proper names. So if you need more than 99 frames, go ahead. Likewise, extract files and print files are no longer identified by a letter. So you're no longer constrained with having 26 of each as a maximum. Again, go ahead. You can use extract files in ISPECs. You know, I'm not suggesting that you go and read files with millions of records in an ISPEC, but, you know, if you want to, you know, if you've got a small table, or for some reason you want to take a few records and write them out to an extract file, or even to read them from an extract file, you can do that with AB Suite. And just a minor one, which is folder levels. In EAE, for organization, you have two kinds of folders. You have functional areas and activities. And then in the generate environment, you have bundles to generate component enable classes, and you have report generate groups to subdivide your reports. In AB Suite, they're all implemented as folders within the application, but you can have as many as you like and as many levels of hierarchy as you like. Okay, you're not constrained to these particular structural elements. So you can organize the application in any way that suits you. And just like EAE, elements can exist in multiple folders. A few more design-oriented things. Alphanumeric items can be much larger in AB Suite than they are in EAE. 262 KB versus 65 KB in EAE. And because you can put strings in arrays, your arrays themselves can also be much larger than they were in EAE. You can define arrays within groups. Again, something you could not do in EAE. And now you can have external methods that can be called using 0 or more parameters. So external methods are, if on MCP, would be libraries, external library calls. DLLs may be on a Windows environment. In EAE, you can only do that using the call statement, and the data has to be passed in globparam if you're going to pass any data. And there's no way to get a return value. You can't, the procedure that you, the method that you call can't give you back an answer if you like. So in AB Suite, we can do that. We can, you're no longer limited to globparam. You can have multiple parameters. They can be of different types, and they can be much larger in size. And we can also get a return value provided. Here's a view of a couple of external class methods where the thing called getHostInfo takes a couple of strings, alphanumeric items as parameters, and we'll update those and get and provide you the results. GetMyMixNumber is something which doesn't take a parameter, but it returns a result, and I can see that because the variable name here is the same as the method itself. So much more flexibility in the way that we call external functions, if you like. Looking at things slightly the other way, we can also declare and define what we call public segment methods in AB Suite. They're similar to global logics in EAE, but much more flexible. They can have all those parameters that you saw. But public segment methods you can invoke from client tools instead of invoking an iSpec. And obviously, if you invoke them directly, the behavior of an iSpec doesn't exist. I mean, it's just a block of code that you invoke. And you can also call them from external programs. So, you know, if you've got a COBOL program on MCP or you've got a .NET program on Windows, then you can invoke these methods written in AB Suite, but you can invoke them from outside the application. Methods can be parameterized, as we saw with the external methods. When you create a method, as I say, the equivalent of a global logic in EAE, when you create a method in AB Suite, you can define it to have multiple parameters, and those parameters can be a number of different types. For example, strings or numbers, booleans, arrays. So that's, you know, again, that's much more flexible than you can get in EAE. And then methods can return a result. So here you can see that the result is essentially a type. It's a typed procedure in other languages, and the type can be Boolean, string, number, etc. In my example here, I've got a method called increment, which takes two parameters, and those parameters are the increment value and the initial value, and it returns a result because we've got a variable with the same name as the method. Within the method, I'm just adding the two values, moving and putting the value in globtotal, and then I return that value as the result of the method. And then when I invoke that method, and again I'm using, if you like, old syntax here, I can execute increment, pass in two values, one of which in this case is a literal. It's a numeric literal, so there's no quotes, no parentheses. I'm going to execute that and take the resulting value and move it into closing balance. Again, it's an example of, you know, more concise code, more flexible code. As an observation, methods that have parameters, that have return values, and restricted data visibility, so any data that they manipulate is contained within the method itself, are opportunities for encapsulation. Encapsulation is an OO term, but think of it as it means that the method is self-contained. As a self-contained module, you can test that method in isolation because you know that it only manipulates data that you give it via parameters, and it will only return data back to those parameters and or via a return value. So as a self-contained module, you don't need, you know, masses of setup or a major, you know, maybe you don't need to do full application regression testing. You can test, if you change this method, you can test it in isolation. As long as it meets the rules defined for its use, then everything else doesn't need retesting. So potentially encapsulation is something to look out for and doing by design because it will have a benefit, repeated benefit on regression testing requirements. So methods. Methods you can define at the segment level, as I mentioned just now, which are kind of similar to global logics, but you can also define additional methods within iSpecs. So iSpecs have the equivalent of the old pre-screen, pre-link, and main that you have in EAE. They have different names, but we can create additional methods that belong to that iSpec. So as an example, if I create an iSpec called newcust and I create a new method on it called add new customer, I can actually then redesign my system so that any code anywhere in the system that wants to add a new customer just calls my method, calls this method, and that will be done. So here's a reasonably simple example. Over on the left-hand side, you can see I've selected cust as an iSpec. And you can see that in the list of attributes for that iSpec, there's an add new customer method with a number of parameters and then a return value, add new customer. When I look at the iSpec, if I look at the, it's not the iSpec, if I look at the logic for the method, you can see that I basically initialize the record, I move the values from the parameters into the customer record, and I do a store. And if the store is successful, then I return a value of true. I said, you know, the add was good, if you like. And then to invoke that method, I can just in any other part of the system, I can just say, I can just refer to cust.addNewCustomer as the method. I can provide the parameters it requires, either as variables or strings, you know, absolute values in this instance. And then I can just say if not customer. So if it returns a value of false, then the add new customer failed. So, you know, again, if you think about how you might do this, you know, in EAE, probably a lot more code and a lot less obvious code in terms of the outcome. Now on the Windows platform, you can also do the same thing with methods being added to reports. So again, you can create your own methods rather than just using the frame logic, which is pretty much the only way you've got to do that in EAE, or other than global logics. One of the really useful things in terms of the way we can design a model in AB Suite is we can create multiple instances of an iSpec. We can define them and reference them in where they're being used. So, for example, if I've got a customer record and I want a customer iSpec and I want multiple copies of that customer referenced within another iSpec, then I can create multiple instances. Each one has a different name. The template for each of those instances is the original iSpec. If I change the original iSpec, then any changes are automatically reflected wherever that iSpec is referenced, and hopefully I can use a minimal amount of logic to manage each instance. So a typical example would be a bank account with multiple account holders, shared account. That would mean that when I wanted to deal with the bank account, I can pull into memory the record, the information about both or each of the multiple account holders simply and easily. In EAE, I'd need to do that by creating, you know, global SDs or local SD groups for each instance of the customer, with all the individual variables declared. So, and then having done that, I need to reference them all individually, and yeah, any changes might require changes to all those things. So, relatively simple example again. Here I've got a process, a method, which is going to merge two customers to create a third one. So in EAE, I've got to read in customer 1, I've got to read in customer 2, I've then got to auto-entry all of the elements from one or the other, doing whatever the merge requires. In AB Suite, I can declare two variables, customer A, existing customer A and B, and inherit the definition from the cust iSpec, And when I look at my code, I can just do a lookup against each of those local instances. I can treat the entire customer record as a single element, so I can just say, you know, move the customer A details to the merged customer record, apply the differences, the changes, so the new customer number, the merged balance, and then do a store. And like I say, if you then change the definition of cost, as long as I'm not referencing the new element or a changed element within my code doesn't change at all, unlike EAE. A couple more things, I think. Complex dictionary items. So in EAE, you know, dictionary items are, you either have a group or, you know, they're essentially data items, let's put it that way. In AB Suite, a dictionary item can be something with one or more variables, with 0 or more painted items, and 0 or more logic methods, sorry. So here's an example. I've created in my dictionary an address class. The definition of that address class has a method, validate address, which returns a value, and I've got 4 data items. I can paint that. So I've painted these elements on a, if you like, on a panel in the painter. And I've defined some logic, and the logic says it's basically just validating, it's the validate address. So it says if address line 1 is spaces, return true. So again, a new feature in AB Suite is we've got a return verb, and the return verb says set the return value to whatever I specify, in this case true, and exit the method. So I don't need lots of if else, or whatever, or labels. And so this method will return true if the address is invalid. When I want to use that, I can invoke that dictionary item one or more times using inheritance. In 7 onwards, we changed the terminology from inheritance to templating, which is probably more correct in an object-oriented approach. But what does that mean? So what it means is in my my iSpec, it happens to be an iSpec srep, I've created 2 attributes, 2 variables, which is the office address and the home address, and they both inherit from the address class. By doing that on the painter, I now have 2 versions or 2 copies of this element. I can, they're treated as a panel. You can move them wherever you like, but I now have 2 elements in my iSpec which refer to the same origin. When I get to the coding, I just use the qualifier of the local name, which is office address or home address, to invoke the validate address method that belongs to that dictionary, that complex dictionary item. So again, the management of this, the ease of coding, the simplicity of coding is much greater than it would be in EAE. I'll leave you to think about how you might do that in EAE today. And then finally, just a few points, because I couldn't sort of pull them together in into the other categories. So some miscellaneous improvements and things that EAE or AB Suite offers you over EAE. First of all, the debugger. Debugging, now you can edit and continue in real time. In EAE, you use developer test. If you find a bug, you've got to shut down developer test. You've got to go and fix it in developer, and then you've got to restart developer test and get back to the same position. No more of that with EAE. Debugger in AB Suite uses SQL Server as its underlying database. So now you can use any of the popular query products to interrogate the data, to view the data. Debugger simulates MCP behavior using EBCDIC data. In EAE, the MCP simulation is really quite restricted because all the data storage is still in ASCII. On developer test, you can say that you want it to run and in EBCDIC mode, and the database, the extract files, the sort collating sequence, they're all handled as EBCDIC, true EBCDIC. and we give you a query and update tool as part of AB Suite to examine that information or that data, because off-the-shelf tools don't recognize Epsidic. You can use Debugger to debug your applications using your own client tools clients. Essentially, Debugger in AB Suite will interact with the Rattle server running on your desktop. And then, if you've got public segment methods in AB Suite, and particularly if they're encapsulated, you can debug those directly. You don't have to run the online system, if you like, in order to debug a method. So that's just a placeholder. Gary Taylor's got a session on Thursday where he's going to talk more about debugger. So if you're interested in this, I'd encourage you to sit in on that session. Source control, just to make sure everybody's aware of it. In EAE, you can only version specific element types. You know, which types get versioned are predetermined by the product design from 20 odd years ago, however long. But you can't fold. So, for example, you can do iSpecs and reports. You can't do folders, and you can't do generate sets. Together, you take that, and that means that really, if you were to take all the versioned elements out of a version bank, out of the source control environment in EAE, you can't recreate the model with all of its hierarchical structure and the runtime environment properties. AB Suite allows you to version anything you want. Pretty much, you can choose the level of granularity. But in terms of all of those element types and the hierarchy of the model, if you take the kind of default options that AB Suite will give you, you can extract from source controls and recreate an exact copy of the model with the hierarchy and with all the runtime properties. And the other thing, just as a bypassing thing, it covers something that Thanga was talking about earlier. Source control in AB Suite is no longer a proprietary tool. Now we use Team Foundation Server or Azure DevOps, and all of that is stored in SQL Server databases. So, you know, it's not a proprietary solution. We rely on the integration that Visual Studio gives us, and Visual Studio is our development environment. Howard mentions most of these things, so again, I don't really need to mention this, but you know, just in a single slide, there's a lot of features in AB Suite, MCP, Builder, and Runtime, where those features are integrated into the development environment. So you can choose to use many of these options, all of these features, whereas in EAE, if you tried to use any of them, either you couldn't or you had to do them outside of the remit of the product itself, ReorgDB, for example. So yeah, larger data item lengths, I guess that's the kind of thing that wasn't covered earlier. We support dynamic schema changes. If you want to add a new data set to your database, you can do that with the system running. Reorganization's been enhanced, so we can do, you know, the software will detect that the reorg you're asking it to do is greater than or close to the limit that the reorg software, the DMS2 reorg software will allow in a single reorg, and will break it up into multiple reorganizations. So within the scope of a system build or generate, that effectively there's no limit to the volume of the things that you can reorganize in one hit. And I guess the other one I really wanted to point out was blobs, binary large objects. So with AB Suite now, you can write a code such that you can store binary data, images, signatures, what have you, within your application. And then final slide, again, you know, some of this was covered by Howard and Thanga. We've got some plans for AB Suite. I don't think probably the runtime issue things were mentioned here. There's also a planned increase in the size of alphanumeric, effectively string variables, not database variables, but string variables to a much larger size. So one of my earlier slides said 262 KB. Actually, it's much larger than that going forward. And that is my lot. Thank you for listening. hope it was of some interest to you. And let me stop sharing my screen and give the control back to Caraway.
Thanks, Andy. Well, actually, there were several questions and answers going on in the chat window in the meantime.
Good. As long as they weren't, when's he going to stop talking? That's good.
Gary, I saw you and Russell responded to some of the questions. Well, the questions which were sent to all participants are visible, really, to all participants. Those questions which were sent to all panelists are not visible to all participants. So, Gary, do you think we should discuss them?
I think that's probably a good idea, just to go through and make sure that everybody can see or understand what the questions were.
Yeah.
What I would say, if anybody else has got any questions, I think it's probably easier to send the questions in via a chat than it is for us to open up the mute, because we got a lot of background noise last time.
What we could do, sorry Gary to interrupt you, if any participant has a question, please raise your hand with pushing that button, and then we will unmute you individually. That's better.
Okay, well, we can do that. But we'll go through and let's answer the questions that are already there. So there was one there from Martin Ale, who I do know because he's out in Uruguay. And Martin's asked the question about performance, and specifically about performance when you split the application and database layer. It's quite a difficult question to answer, but I will sum it up, and I have put an answer in there, and that's that splitting the application and database is only something we've allowed within the product since AB Suite, and only on the Windows platform currently. And that split means that the paths to the data now are longer. The problem being is that when the applications were typically written, they were all written for and assumed the application and database were close together. And as such, you tend to read more data and more often than you would do when you realize there's a longer path to that data. So whilst I can understand the question about can we translate things into different verbs, into different SQL Server verbs, it's not so much about the SQL Server verbs as understanding how you're accessing that data. So yes, we could potentially change things, but we would probably need to look at it on a very individual basis rather than more generic view. So the splitting of the application and database layer is a lot of the problems that people see from that are because the application was never designed to run that way. I know some people might think that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's really the way we've seen. And and the way to fix it is don't read as much and don't read as often. Don't reread data, keep it in memory some other way. And there's lots of techniques, and some of the things that Andy's already mentioned would help with that. I think if you've got further questions on that, Martin, please send them in to us and we'll try and answer them, or I'll try and answer them. But it's not a very straightforward answer to your question, unfortunately. The next question was regarding somewhere down here about return variables. Are they all always named as the same name as the method? And the answer to that is yes. That's how you define a return variable. You can either just create a variable with the same name as the method, or if you right-click in the variable area of the members tab, there's an option there that says add return variable. That will add the variable of the right name, and then you can just change the type. So the examples that Andy was showing there was use of a variable and returning a Boolean. So you would set the return variable to be of type Boolean, and that way then when you'd return it, that's what will come back. And I think the last question, oh no, there was another one here about secure rattle. Is it only available for MCP? The answer is no, that's going to be coming out in 8.0 for the Windows platform. And I believe there are also plans to do the same thing on the OS 2200 platform for 8.0 as well. The last question is, are there any plans to support GitHub version control at a later date? I'm not aware of any, but the one thing I would say is if you've got something like that where we don't support it today, raise it as a new feature suggestion, raise a support request, mark it as a new feature suggestion, and tell us why you would want it, what's the business reasons behind it. I suspect I understand. I mean, there is cost implications of using the Team Foundation version control. Well, it's the Team Foundation version control aspect of Azure DevOps.
I don't know if you've seen it, Gary, but Grant said that there are plans to support it. So.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So, I hadn't realised that Grant was on the call as well. But yeah, so I would encourage you, where you've got questions like this, where we maybe don't do something today, raise it as an NFS, particularly if you can put some, well, not so much justification behind it, but describe how it will help your business and what the reasons are behind that. And they are things that will then get considered. The example being, rattle and the secure rattles, that came about as the result of people raising NFSs. So raise them. I'm not saying they're going to get implemented in the next release or if they would ever get implemented, but if you raise them, we'll understand that you've got those requirements and we can then look into them, or engineering can look into them and potentially provide that capability in the future. And as we've seen here, I even learned something today, so maybe potentially we'll support GitHub at a future date. I don't believe it will be, well, certainly not in 7 at the moment. Whether it be, I doubt it'd be in 8, but it'd probably be later than that.
Question from Richard Nemeth. Gary?
Okay. Can't see it in the window.
No, I can't.
The question is, are there performance implications of the new LDL plus features? That is execution time, MIPS usage, especially if we talk about array usage. That's the question.
Carol, in the benefit of all, can you just paste that message onto the chat window?
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, my own view is that it wouldn't be any more expensive than doing it in EAE the other way, or the old way, if you like. And I might even hope that they were slightly more efficient. But in general terms, if these are things that you could have done in EAE and that there are now different or quote better ways to do it in AB Suite, I would not expect the performance cost, the MIPS cost of those things to be any different, and hopefully slightly better. I don't know if Howard's still on the call, if he had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, you're right, Andy. In like-for-like comparisons, we do our performance benchmarking at every sprint of our development pretty much to make sure we've introduced no issues, and we compare back to previous release, in this case 7.0, really that's 6.1, and we don't see any degradation in adopting this new style of, simplified commands, verbs, etc.
Area that you can't do a like-for-like comparison is much larger arrays, because you can't do that in EA. But then if you needed that capability, you'd probably end up with some kind of contrived solution in EAE using many more smaller arrays.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the AB Suite. We went up to the 262 KB string length, and then we went to 8.0 going to the 6 megabyte string length. Yeah, I mean, potentially, and we did hit a performance issue with the 6 megabyte. There was an area of initialization that was causing us grief in our performance, but due to the some of the nice features in COBOL 85 that we still generate under the bonnet, we're able to remove any overhead, but still allow the customer access to that full 6 megabytes of either a string they want to manipulate or a parameter they want to send or receive externally, etc. So we do a lot of work to make sure that anything we do introduce does not send the performance backwards.
I think also you need to recognize that sometimes new capabilities, they allow you to do things you just can't do today. So, there has to be some kind of, I guess, balance in the fact that if you can't do it today in EAE and you can do it in AB Suite and you need to do it in AB Suite, then, if there is a small performance cost, that's a balancing act that people need to decide whether they're prepared to accept. But yeah, I think generally we would expect them to be similar or better in AB Suite. I see some other questions coming in.
Take the first one.
EAE supports DMS2 data, but not set and subset physical sectioning. Yeah, I think AB Suite does
correct
physical sectioning for sets and subsets. I forgot all about that.
There's another one there to do with, in our project we use a UI as a front end and EA in the back end. After AB Suite, can it be used as front end? Is that capable? I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but assuming, do you mean can you continue to use the same UI? The answer is if it uses a supported interface, and that's the key part. There are a number of interfaces that were available in EAE that have subsequently support for them has terminated. EAE's been around since the early 2000s, so it's been around for the best part of 18, 20 years. And over that time, a number of interfaces have been de-supported. If you're using one of those, or you're using an interface that's not documented, then that will probably not work with AB Suite. If you're using something that is supported today, then it should work. So an example being, if your UI today is written and uses the component enabler interface via client tools, then that should be capable of being moved forward to AB Suite, and it will continue to work. AB Suite will use later versions of associated software, and so that may have some impact on your application as well. So I won't say it will work, but it should.
Thanks.
I'll let you take the next one.
Well, I'm thinking the next one may be an OS 2200 question. Regarding masking security feature, is it related to DMS? And then later on there's an RDMS. So will it mask all the fields in the Unisys DB automatically? Well, probably Russell's the best person to ask that in terms of OS 2200. I would just say masking, it doesn't do all fields automatically. You have to identify the fields that you want to be masked. But I don't know.
Doesn't it only mask it in the log file, though?
No. Masking your databases, no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's something Howard was showing you just now.
For MCP, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if Russell has an answer to that, as maybe the OS 2200 lead at this moment in time, but that may be one we have to just take away and come back to you. Russell, do you know offhand?
Be
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I could get off mute. The implementation for OS 2200, it is the first one. There are a lot of features that aren't going to make it into the first release of AB Suite on the OS 2200, and the masking feature is one that is unlikely to be in the first release of AB Suite on OS 2200 at this stage.
Okay, thanks. Are you planning to have a demo on test automation during the subsequent sessions? I'm not sure we're having a demo. I believe Nigel Tunnicliffe is going to be talking about it in a little more detail. But I don't think it'll be a demonstration.
Yeah, that's right, Andy. It's not. It won't be a demo, but I do talk about it in a bit more detail.
Okay. Yeah, Richard. I mean, I think you know, if that's of real interest to you, then you know maybe that's something you can come back to us and we can try to organise at some stage. But no, it's not demonstrated this week. Okay, queries from John Codling. Does ATT run against the mainframe? Yeah, I think, yeah, Russell, I guess that's...
Well, just to answer the first part of that question, yes, the demo that I did, the automated tests, the ATT tests, were running against the application on the 2200 mainframe.
So it wasn't smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, no smoke and mirrors. It was all working as it should, and it connects via the Rattle interface. So it's the ATT is basically acting like a Rattle client and interacting with the application through that Rattle interface.
Good.
But you can use ATT against debugger as well. So you can run it against the host, and if you wanted to, you could potentially define the test as part of debugger testing as well. There's another question there from Martin. Can ATT be used for performance testing? It's not designed to be used that way. ATT is more aimed at the concept of functional testing. Obviously, it's going to replay the transactions back to the host, and theoretically, you could use the test application that it builds and put some timing in there, but it's not its primary purpose.
I mean, I think the key point, Gary, is that it's single-threaded. You're effectively simulating a single user.
Yes, and that's a very good point. There are alternate ways to do performance testing, and maybe that's something we cover in a future session. But I would say, no, ATT is not really the performance testing tool. Query for Caroline, will sessions be published in YouTube?
I'm not sure it's the right question for me, but definitely we are recording the session and we will make it available to participants in some shape or form. I'm not sure whether it will be YouTube or some other way, but yeah, we're recording it and making it available.
That appears to be it. Give it a minute just in case any more questions come in. But yeah, we may be at the end of our time.
The slides, yes, we will also make the slides available.
Yep. Normally we post them to a site where you can download them, but
yeah,
I guess if people can't afford, that they don't want to wait for that, then they can approach us individually, and we could mail the slides as they stand.
Yes. All right. It looks like there are no more questions today. So tomorrow we will start at the same time as we started today, with some interesting items on our agenda about integration capabilities, integration technology, and some practical examples. So I think it's worth to join also tomorrow. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining, for the presenters, for presenting, and see you tomorrow.